The void of space was never truly silent. To those who had never left Earth, it seemed like an endless, black emptiness, an infinite canvas of stars scattered without pattern. But to the ones who lived in the steel bellies of ships, who carved their lives into the corridors of stations, who inhaled recycled oxygen and exhaled fear, the void always hummed. The low thrum of engines, the faint tremor of hull plates flexing against micro-impacts, the whisper of electronics, all of it combined into a presence. Commander Elias Rourke listened to that hum as though it were music. To him, it was the heartbeat of humanity's persistence. And persistence was all they had left. The year was 2641, and Earth no longer existed. Not in any recognizable way. The blue marble of ancient memory was now a cinder, a hollowed husk orbiting Sol, cracked by bombardment, lifeless. When the Scytheborn descended, humanity had been naive. The first transmission from them had not been words, but fire. Cities melted in moments, oceans boiled. Within a year, 9 billion souls had been cut down. What remained were the scattered fragments, the flotilla. The flotilla was not a government, nor an empire. It was desperation bound together with rivets and duct tape, a wandering fleet of surviving ships carrying perhaps 40 million human beings. They drifted from star to star, hunted by the Scytheborn like prey animals driven across a killing field. Elias Rourke had been a lieutenant during Earth's fall. Now, at 36, he commanded the Resolute, one of the larger cruisers still battle-worthy. His hair was cut close, streaked already with gray, his eyes sharpened by years of flight and loss. He carried the weight of command the way an ancient knight carried his shield, reluctantly, but without falter. "Status," Elias said, his voice echoing in the dim-lit bridge. "Still clear, Commander," answered Lieutenant Mara Ilian, his second in command. She was younger, 28, but carved from iron. Her face bore the pallor of long light years, but her gaze never wavered. No Scytheborn signatures on the outer sweep. Fuel cells at 63%. Life support stable. The bridge crew worked in silence. No idle chatter. Every person aboard the Resolute knew how fragile survival was. Humanity did not waste breath anymore. Rourke leaned forward in the command chair, fingers brushing the edge of the console. He stared out the reinforced viewport at the starfield, 1,000 distant suns, none of which would welcome them. Somewhere out there, the Scytheborn waited. The hunters. A flicker of static cut across the comm line. Then a voice. Weak, ragged, human. "This is the Harbinger. Emergency distress. We are under pursuit. Coordinates." The voice broke into static again. Mara's eyes snapped toward Rourke. "That's one of ours." "Patch it," Rourke ordered. The signal stabilized for half a second. "Please, Scytheborn raiders, engines failing, any ship, respond." And then nothing. The bridge was frozen. Elias closed his eyes briefly. The Harbinger. He knew the name. A supply hauler, retrofitted for survival, carrying nearly 12,000 souls. Families. Children. "Distance?" he asked quietly. Mara's hands flew across her console. 3 light hours. If we push the drive, we can reach them in under 2. 2, Rourke repeated. His gaze hardened. And the Scytheborn? Unknown. But if they're broadcasting under fire, the enemy's already in range. The hum of the ship deepened as the crew awaited his word. To chase after the Harbinger was to court death. To ignore them was to condemn 12,000 humans to the void. "Set course," Elias said. His voice cut the silence like steel. "Burn the drive." The Resolute roared across the black, its engines spitting plasma like a wounded beast refusing to fall. Elias stood on the bridge, watching the stars smear into blurs. His mind returned, unwillingly, to Earth's last days. He remembered the skies burning, the horizon folding into flame. He remembered his sister, Alina, clutching her daughter as the evacuation alarms screamed. He remembered the look in her eyes, pleading, desperate, as the military transports closed their doors. He had been pulled aboard the Resolute. She had not. And he had never forgiven himself. "Commander." Mara's voice brought him back. "We're entering their sector." On the viewport, the wreck of the Harbinger came into view. Its hull was torn open, venting atmosphere into space like a bleeding wound. Escape pods jettisoned, drifting in chaotic spirals. And around them, shadows. Scythe-borne vessels. The enemy ships were grotesque, as though designed to unnerve. Their hulls were jagged, like shards of obsidian fused into shapes that should not fly. They shimmered with a sickly green luminescence, their edges rippling as though half submerged in another dimension. They did not sail through space, they seemed to tear through it. 3 raiders circled the Harbinger, methodically blasting escape pods as they fled. Flashes of human lives erased in silence. Mara's knuckles whitened on the console. We can't fight 3 raiders alone. Elias rose from his chair, eyes blazing. We can buy time. Signal the flotilla. Call in every ship within 10 light hours. Until they arrive, we hold the line. The bridge came alive. Orders rippled. Shields rose. Weapons armed. The Resolute plunged into the battle. Its cannons spat lances of plasma, blue fire streaking across the void. One Scythe-borne raider turned instantly, like a predator scenting prey, and lunged. Its return fire hammered the Resolute's shields, shaking the bridge with brutal force. Shields at 78%. Shouted Ensign Cato. Elias barked. Target its thrusters. Cripple it. The Resolute twisted, diving under the alien vessel, plasma cannons raking its underside. Sparks of unnatural green fire sprayed as the raider spun out of control, colliding with one of its own. Both ships tumbled, one shattering in an explosion that painted the stars with emerald flame. The crew roared in triumph. But it was short-lived. The 3rd raider descended on the escape pods. One by one, human lives winked out. No, Mara hissed. Her fingers slammed across the controls, firing every auxiliary turret. You bastards. Elias's voice cut through her fury. Focus. Save who we can. He could see the pods spiraling. Thousands of fragile capsules, too many to protect all. But one cluster remained within reach. Bring us about, he ordered. Cover those pods. All batteries, suppress the 3rd raider. The Resolute surged forward, intercepting the alien ship with a wall of fire. Plasma blasts carved deep wounds into the jagged hull. For the first time, the Scythe-borne faltered, twisting away as if startled by resistance. Then, light. From the darkness beyond, more ships arrived. Human signatures. The flotilla had heard the call. Half a dozen cruisers dropped from warp, weapons blazing. The void erupted into war. The Scythe-borne retreated, their twisted silhouettes folding into shadows, vanishing into the rift they had come from. Silence followed. The Resolute drifted among the wreckage. Survivors were gathered from the pods, their voices trembling with relief and grief. Out of 12,000, only 4,000 lived. Elias stood at the viewport, jaw set. They had saved some, but not enough. Never enough. Mara came to his side. You bought them time. Without you, none would have made it. Rourke didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the stars, on the direction the Scythe-borne had fled. They fear us, he said finally. His voice was low, dangerous. Not today, not yet, but they felt resistance. And one day, they will learn that humanity doesn't break. The hum of the ship filled the silence again. The heartbeat of persistence. The spark in the void. The survivors of the Harbinger walked the corridors of the Resolute in silence. Wide-eyed children clung to parents' arms, dazed men and women moved like ghosts through metal halls, their faces hollowed by grief. The ship reeked of recycled air and blood-soaked bandages. Yet for all the suffering, there was still breath. Still life. Commander Elias Rourke moved among them quietly. He did not speak much, words felt too thin, too fragile, but his presence carried weight. He stopped where he could, placing a hand on a shoulder, locking eyes with the lost. A silent promise, you are not forgotten. When he returned to the bridge, Mara Ilian was waiting. Flotilla Command has convened a council, she said, voice tight. They want you there, immediately. Rourke arched a brow. A council? They must be desperate. They are, Mara said simply. The council chamber of the flotilla was not a grand hall, nor a shining dome of diplomacy. It was the gutted cargo bay of the Atlas, the largest ship still intact. Cargo crates had been welded into benches, scrap metal into a long table. Around it sat the leaders of the remnants of humanity, fleet captains, colony governors, militia commanders. Some were wrapped in uniforms patched beyond recognition, others in civilian rags. They all looked like survivors. Rourke entered, his boots echoing. The room's murmur quieted. He was not the most powerful man here, nor the most senior. But his name had spread since the battle at the Harbinger. To face 3 raiders and still return with survivors, it was a story whispered like a spark of hope. Admiral Kestrin, an older man with eyes like flint, presided over the meeting. His uniform bore the insignia of the old United Earth Navy, though the fabric was scorched, the seams frayed. He gestured for Rourke to sit. "Commander," Kestrin said, "you've earned your place here. What you witnessed, what you survived, changes everything." Rourke remained standing. "The Scytheborn can bleed." His voice carried across the chamber. "We crippled one, forced them to retreat. They are not gods, not demons. They can be fought." The words rippled through the chamber like a tremor. But Governor Celine Varin, a gaunt woman from the agricultural ship Haven Seed, shook her head sharply. "You risked everything for 4,000 lives," she said, "and nearly lost an entire cruiser. If we keep playing their game, if we keep meeting them head-on, we will burn out. Humanity will be finished." "We're finished already," muttered one of the militia captains. "We're just waiting for the knife." Rourke slammed his fist on the table, the metal ringing. "No, we are not finished. We're hunted because we keep running. Because we scatter and hide. We have to strike back. Show them we are not prey." "And where?" Celine demanded. "The Scytheborn appear and vanish at will. Their ships rip through the void as though they bend it. We don't even know where they come from. Then we find out." Rourke's gaze swept the chamber. "The flotilla has engineers, scientists, fighters. We can build scouts. We can track them. For every life they take, we take something back." The chamber buzzed. Arguments erupted, fear against fury, despair against defiance. Finally, Admiral Kestrin raised a hand. Silence fell. "The truth is this," Kestrin said. "If we continue as we are, drifting and hiding, humanity will dwindle until we are nothing but a memory. Commander Rourke is right, we must fight, or we die." Celine's lips thinned, but she said nothing. Kestrin turned to Rourke. "We will form a vanguard. A spearhead unit, volunteers only. Their mission, to hunt the hunters." Rourke inclined his head. "Then I volunteer the Resolute." The vanguard was born. From across the flotilla, volunteers came. Some were hardened veterans who had stared into alien fire and survived. Others were farmers, miners, mechanics, ordinary people with nothing left to lose. They brought what they had: patched armor, scavenged weapons, courage buried beneath scars. Rourke drilled them in the hollow belly of the Resolute. Mara handled logistics, coordinating with engineers who began modifying ships for pursuit and reconnaissance. Small, fast craft were cobbled together from shuttle husks and gunboat wreckage. Every hand worked. Days turned into weeks. And then, one night cycle aboard the Resolute, a strange transmission was intercepted. Not Scytheborn, not human, something else. The voice was warped, fragmented by distance and interference. But it was unmistakably language. "You, resist, hold, strong?" The bridge crew stared in shock. "Source?" Rourke demanded. "Outer rim of this system," Mara said, eyes wide. "Signals weak. Faint power signature." Rourke's mind raced. Another survivor species? Allies? Or bait? "Prepare a scout run," he said. "I'm going myself." The scout vessel was little more than a coffin with engines. Stripped of heavy weapons, built for speed. Rourke piloted it himself, Mara riding shotgun despite his protest. The signal led them to a drifting derelict. At first glance, it looked like another Scytheborn nightmare, blackened hull, twisted shapes. But as they drew closer, Rourke saw the difference. The ship was alien, yes. But not Scytheborn. Its lines were smoother, curved like flowing water, shimmering faintly with dying energy. A single fracture split its side. They docked cautiously, weapons ready. Inside, the air was thin, stale. Lights flickered, and then, they saw them. Bodies, not human. Tall, slender figures with elongated limbs and delicate features. Their skin shimmered faintly, as though embedded with traces of crystal. Most were dead, slumped where they had fallen. But one still breathed. It lay against a wall, chest rising shallowly. Its eyes opened as Rourke approached, eyes like liquid silver. The creature's lips moved. The voice was faint, halting. But the words were unmistakable. "You, fight, Scythe-born?" Rourke froze. "You can speak our language?" "Not yours," the being whispered. Voice, carried. Memory, shared. "Scythe-born, destroy, all." Mara crouched beside it, shock flickering across her features. "They're fighting them too." The alien's hand trembled, reaching toward Rourke. He grasped it without hesitation. Its skin was cool, almost glassy. "You, not alone," it whispered. "Others, scattered, hiding? But, together?" Its breath shuddered. A final exhale. The silver eyes dimmed. Rourke remained crouched, hand still clutching the alien's cooling fingers. His jaw clenched. "Together," he murmured. When they returned to the flotilla with the alien's body, the council erupted in chaos. Some saw hope. Proof that humanity was not the only victim, that allies might exist. Others saw danger. Proof that the Scythe-born's war was larger than they could imagine, stretching across civilizations. But Rourke knew one thing. Humanity could no longer cower. The Vanguard launched its first strike within a month. The target was a Scythe-born relay station, a jagged construct suspended above a dead world, pulsing with green light. Recon drones had traced transmissions flowing from it across the void. The Resolute, leading 3 cruisers and 2 gunboats, dropped from warp above the planet's shadow. "Shields up. Weapons hot," Rourke ordered. His voice was calm, steady, though his blood roared like fire. "We cripple their relay. Cut their chain." The battle was swift and brutal. The Scythe-born defenders swarmed like insects, but the Vanguard fought with fury born of centuries of loss. The Resolute tore through their hulls, plasma fire ripping apart obsidian frames. Mara coordinated fire like a conductor leading an orchestra of vengeance. At last, the relay station shuddered, its green light sputtering. With a final barrage, it cracked apart, collapsing in on itself with a silent implosion that sent debris scattering like bone fragments into the void. The Vanguard withdrew, battered but victorious. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity had not just survived. They had struck back. And across the flotilla, word spread like wildfire. Songs were sung in crowded mess halls. Children whispered stories in the dark. The hunters had been wounded. The prey had bared its teeth. Rourke stood alone at the viewport of the Resolute, watching the stars. He thought of the alien's dying words. "You are not alone." The Scythe-born were vast. Terrifying, older than humanity by millennia. But now, there was a chance, thin as starlight, but real, that others fought too. And if they could find each other, the storm would gather. And humanity would no longer be a spark in the void. They would be fire. The Vanguard's victory at the relay station echoed through the flotilla like thunder rolling through hollowed canyons. On every ship, voices whispered the same words: "We fought. We won." For a people who had spent centuries running, centuries hiding, it was a revelation. Children who had never seen Earth drew pictures of starships spearing monsters. Mechanics painted crude symbols of fire on their hulls. Songs rose in the mess halls, sung off-key, but with a conviction that shook the steel walls of the fleet. But no one knew better than Commander Elias Rourke that the storm was coming. He stood in the observation dome of the Resolute, a rare moment of solitude. Beyond the thick glass, the stars burned cold, indifferent. Mara's reflection appeared beside him. "Word is spreading too fast," she said quietly. "Every soul in the flotilla thinks the war is turning." Rourke's jaw clenched. "And it is, but not like they imagine. The Scythe-born won't ignore us now. They'll come, harder than before." Mara's eyes searched his. "So we keep striking? Keep feeding them reasons to crush us?" "We don't have a choice," he said. "If we wait, they kill us piecemeal. If we strike, we might buy enough momentum to change the game." Her gaze softened. "You're betting everything on a spark catching fire." Rourke's lips thinned into a hard line. "No, I'm betting everything on humanity remembering what we are. Fire doesn't beg the wind to spare it. Fire consumes." The Vanguard did not rest. Scouts pushed deeper into the black, tracking faint Scythoborn transmissions, mapping rift points where their ships tore reality open. Each mission was a knife edge, half the scouts never returned. But with each death, the survivors learned. They adapted. They grew sharper. Then came the message. It arrived as a burst of energy, modulated into sound. Not human, not Scythoborn, something else. Echoes remain. Allies seek. The flame resists. Rourke convened the Vanguard Council aboard the Resolute. Captains and squad leaders crowded into the war room, faces lit by the blue glow of holocharts. This came from the rim of the Seraphis cluster, Rourke said, pointing to the star map. Coordinates embedded. Someone is reaching out, and I intend to reach back. A murmur swept the room. Captain Drex, a scarred brute of a man who had once commanded a mining barge, frowned. It's bait. You know that. The Scythoborn will be waiting. Maybe, Rourke said, but if it's real, if there are others resisting, we can't afford to ignore it. Mara folded her arms. Even if it is bait, we can use it. If the Scythoborn gather there, we strike. Show them that every trap they set cuts both ways. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, one by one, heads nodded. The course was set. The Resolute led the strike fleet into the Seraphis cluster. 7 cruisers, 4 gunboats, and dozens of scavenged fighters strapped with weapons that barely held together. A ragged force, but united. The system they entered was a graveyard. Shattered moons drifted in silent orbits, their surfaces charred. Hulks of ships, alien, human, unrecognizable, floated as corpses in the void. And at the heart of it all, suspended above the cracked world of Seraphis IV, was a Scythoborn citadel. It loomed like a black crown, jagged towers reaching outward, veins of green fire crawling along its surface. Rift storms churned around it, reality bending like a wounded animal. And then the voices came. Rourke stiffened as the comms erupted, not in words, but in pressure. The Scythoborn broadcast was not sound, it was intrusion, clawing at the mind. The crew cried out, clutching heads, some bleeding from the nose and ears. Rourke gritted his teeth and forced the words out. Mute the comms, now. The sound cut off, leaving only ragged breathing. But the damage was done. Every crewman had felt it, the weight of the Scythoborn, pressing into their skulls, whispering the same message. We see you. We will erase you. Rourke's hands tightened on the console. Battle stations. We burn their crown to ash. The fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. The Scythoborn citadel awakened. Its surface split open, vomiting out raiders and warships, jagged things screaming across the void. Green lances of energy slashed into the human fleet, ripping fighters to pieces. But the Vanguard did not scatter. They pressed forward in formation, plasma fire ripping into alien hulls. The Resolute spearheaded the assault, shields flaring white as blast after blast struck home. Target their tower nodes, Mara shouted. Cut their power grid. One by one, human ships locked onto the towering spires of the citadel, unleashing concentrated barrages. Explosions rippled across the structure, sections collapsing inward. The void burned. But then, the trap closed. Rifts split open around the battlefield. More Scythoborn ships poured out, countless in number, a tide of jagged nightmares. The human fleet faltered. This is suicide, Drex snarled over comms. We can't hold this. A voice cut across the channel. Not human. Hold. Together. Everyone froze. From the far side of the system, shapes emerged. Not Scythoborn. Sleek, silver-hued ships, their hulls glowing faintly as though woven from crystal and light. The same design as the dying alien Rourke had held weeks before. And they were not alone. Other vessels appeared alongside them, each different, each scarred by war. Insect-like ships of chitinous armor. Heavy, fortress-like leviathans bristling with cannons. A patchwork coalition, dozens of species, all converging on Seraphis. The comms filled with voices, layered, alien, but unified. You are not alone. We are the Echo. We resist. The battlefield erupted anew. The alien coalition swept into the Scythoborn flank, tearing through their reinforcements with weapons that glowed like starlight. For the first time in recorded history, the Scythoborn faltered. Rourke's blood surged. All ships, Form with the Echo. Drive them into the Citadel. The Resolute dove into the storm, fighting side by side with alien vessels. A crystalline frigate shielded it from incoming fire, while a Leviathan ship crushed a raider in its massive claws. Humanity was no longer a lone spark. It was part of a firestorm. Together, they struck the Citadel. Towers shattered, rift nodes collapsed, and with a final, deafening explosion, the Scythe-born fortress broke apart, fragments scattering into the void like shards of night. Silence followed. The Scythe-born retreated, folding back into their rifts. For the first time in centuries, they abandoned a battlefield. The coalition ships formed around the battered human fleet. On the bridge of the Resolute, a hollow shimmered to life. A tall, crystalline figure appeared, the same species as the alien Rourke had once held as it died. "You carry flame," the being said, voice resonating like music. "Alone, it flickers. Together, it burns. Will you stand with us?" Rourke straightened, battered but unbroken. "We will. Humanity stands." The bridge crew erupted in cheers. For the first time, humanity had allies. For the first time, the Scythe-born had bled and retreated. The fire had spread. And the war for the galaxy had truly begun. The alliance was fragile, born from desperation and battle fire. The Echo, this coalition of shattered civilizations, gathered in the ruins of Seraphis, licking their wounds. Ships drifted together in uneasy formation, crystalline frigates, insectoid dreadnoughts, Leviathan carriers, human cruisers scarred but unbroken. For the first time in remembered history, the Scythe-born had been forced to retreat. And for the first time, Commander Elias Rourke allowed himself to feel something he had buried for centuries. Hope. The council chamber was aboard the Resolute now, for the humans had been the spark that ignited the fire. Around the long table sat beings of a dozen species. Some towered over the others, their forms half light, half matter. Others scuttled with clicking limbs, their voices translated into harsh static. And across from Rourke sat the crystalline emissary who called themselves Serenia, their body refracting light into shifting rainbows. "Your resistance was a beacon," Serenia said, their voice melodic. "We were scattered, hunted, we believed no one could stand. But you did. And now, we gather." Rourke nodded slowly. "Then we strike. Not in defense. Not in desperation. We take the war to them." A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. "The Scythe-born are endless," hissed one insectoid warchief, mandibles clacking. "They tear the veil itself. Where they fall, more rise. You would lead us to slaughter." "They bleed," Mara Ilian said sharply. She sat at Rourke's side, eyes cold fire. "We've seen it. You've all seen it. They retreat when pressed. They hide wounds like any predator." "And if we fall?" another voice demanded. "If the coalition breaks, there will be nothing left but cinders." Rourke rose to his feet. The room quieted. "If we do nothing, we die slow. Each of us, each world. The Scythe-born do not conquer. They erase. There will be no surrender, no survivors. Only silence." His gaze swept them, hard and unflinching. "But if we stand together, human, alien, all, we can be something they cannot erase. We can be fire." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Serenia's crystalline form pulsed with light. "The human speaks truth. The Scythe-born are not infinite. Their strength comes from the rifts, their hive across realities. Strike the hive, and the swarm falters." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "You know where their hive lies." "Not a place," Serenia whispered. "A wound in creation. A breach where their dimension overlaps ours. The Nexus. It lies beyond the Orion Shroud, guarded by fleets vast enough to blot stars." The chamber filled with whispers, fear and awe mingling. Rourke slammed his hand on the table. "Then that's where we go." The months that followed were like none humanity had ever known. The coalition forged itself into an army. Shipyards bloomed in hidden nebulae, welded from scavenged wrecks and alien craft. Human engineers worked alongside crystalline artisans, insectoid fabricators, Leviathan biosmiths. Technologies merged, plasma cannons fused with crystal focusing, armor plated with chitin grown like bone. The flotilla transformed. No longer ragged survivors, they became soldiers of fire. Children who had known nothing but fear now watched fleets assemble like constellations. Farmers took up arms beside alien warriors. Songs spread across languages, sung in harmonies no species alone could make. And through it all, Rourke stood at the center. Not as a king, not as an admiral, but as the stubborn voice that refused to yield. Humanity had become the flame at the Coalition's heart. The day came when the fleet was ready. 10,000 ships. A coalition of dozens of species, bound by shared scars. They gathered at the edge of the Orion Shroud, where reality itself seemed to waver like heat. And beyond it, the Nexus burned. A vast whirlpool of black and green light, twisting space into impossible shapes. Around it swarmed the Scythoborn armada, ships by the thousands, jagged titans blotting out the stars. It was more than any sane commander would face. But sanity had no place here. On the bridge of the Resolute, Rourke stood tall, eyes locked on the swirling abyss ahead. Mara at his side, crew at their stations, faces pale but steady. All ships, Rourke said, voice carrying across comms to 1,000 species, 1,000,000 lives. Today, we stop running. Today, we burn our names into the void. They wanted silence. We'll give them fire. A roar answered him, a cacophony of voices across species, across worlds. The Coalition surged forward. The battle for the Nexus was not a war. It was the end of worlds colliding. The Scythoborn armada descended like a tide of knives. Rift fire slashed through the Coalition's first line, tearing ships apart in green flame. But the fleet pressed on, answering with torrents of plasma, crystal lances, living missiles birthed from Leviathan carriers. Human cruisers fought in the thick of it, the Resolute leading charges through impossible odds. Mara directed fire with precision, carving openings where none existed. Alien allies shielded them, absorbed blows that would have ended them, answered with their own fury. Still, the Scythoborn pressed. For every enemy ship shattered, 3 more poured through the rifts. Rourke's voice never wavered. Forward, always forward. The Coalition drove into the heart of the swarm. At the Nexus itself, the rift boiled, vomiting endless reinforcements. Its surface was a storm of green lightning, a wound that bled eternity. Serenya's voice filled the Coalition channels. The Nexus must be sealed. Destroy their bridge, and the Scythoborn will fracture. But it will require a core strike. A vessel through the breach. Rourke's eyes narrowed. He knew what that meant. I'll take the Resolute. Mara spun toward him. No, you can't. It has to be us, he said quietly. We were the spark. We carry the fire. She stared at him, jaw trembling, then nodded once. Then we go together. The Resolute plunged into the maelstrom, shields screaming as rift energy clawed at its hull. Behind them, the Coalition threw itself into a last, desperate wall, holding the Scythoborn at bay. Ships burned, worlds' worth of lives extinguished, but they held. The Nexus loomed. Inside, reality folded into impossible geometries. Towers of obsidian stretched into infinity. Shapes moved in the shadows, vast and incomprehensible. The hive itself. The Resolute's hull peeled, systems failing, but Rourke pressed on. Core overloaded, Mara reported, voice shaking. We can detonate inside. It'll collapse the breach. Rourke's gaze swept the bridge. His crew stared back, terrified but resolute. They knew. He drew a slow breath. Then we make it count. The Resolute dove into the heart of the Nexus. Alarms blared. The ship groaned. But Rourke stood unflinching, hand steady on the console. All ships, he said across the comms, voice carried to every corner of the Coalition. Remember us. Remember Earth. Remember every soul they silenced. Today, humanity answers. Today, we are fire. He looked at Mara. She met his eyes, her hand sliding into his. Together, she whispered. Together, he echoed. The Resolute's core ignited. Light engulfed the Nexus. A sun was born in the wound. The rift screamed, collapsing inward. Scythoborn ships were torn apart, their connection severed. The armada fractured, burning as the Nexus imploded into nothing. Silence followed. But not the silence of extinction. The silence of victory. When the void cleared, the Coalition drifted in stunned quiet. Ships scarred, fleets broken. but alive. The nexus was gone. The Scytheborn scattered, crippled, no longer endless. And at the center of it all, the Resolute was no more. But the name remained. On every ship, across every species, a single story spread. Of a human vessel that had carried fire into the abyss and sealed the wound. Of a commander who refused to yield. Of a people who had risen from ashes and taught the galaxy that silence could be defied. Songs were sung, statues carved. Across 1,000 worlds, a single phrase burned into history. Humanity does not break. Generations later, children of crystal and flesh, of claw and bone, would look to the stars and whisper the tale of the ashes of silence. Of the spark that became a blaze. Of the prey that became fire. And of the day the void itself remembered what it meant to fear.